Good morning and welcome to the Unitarian Universalist Church in Eugene. My name is Heidi Gould. My pronouns are she, her. I am a white woman with short silver hair and glasses, and today I'm wearing mostly black and tie-dyed dress. Let us all welcome our Zoom church, meeting together each week online. Zoom friends, please use the chat to greet each other and later to share your prayer requests, joys, and sorrows. You know, we can sing the old songs, even if we don't agree with all the words. The final words of our opening hymn say that we can never stay or rest when we're doing the work of justice and peacemaking. But I say that it is vital that we make space in our lives to stay and rest, to relax and remember, to sink in and open. I'm inviting you to settle in for another reason. I think today's service will overflow time-wise. On this Memorial Day Sunday, we will hear from 4 Unitarian Universalist veterans, one of whom is joining us from Mexico. Thank you for sharing your stories and perspectives. We're also building an altar for the ones we have loved and admired, those whom we respect and honor and miss. Peacemakers, warriors, conscientious objectors, service members. You'll have a chance to add names and drawings later. Now, if Adeline would be so kind to join us in lighting our chalice. I think there is no better symbol of the hope for peace than our young ones. Thank you both for coming up this morning. War and peace bring up so many tender feelings. Some of us have lived through war. Some of our families have survived war. Some of our friends and loved ones have died in war. Society would have us take sides, but here in this sanctuary, in this holy hour, we listen with full hearts. We behold one another in the fullness of our common humanity. We hold each other in love. As love is the center of our faith, we seek peace through our shared practices of love, justice, equity, transformation, pluralism, interdependence, and generosity. Deeds, not creeds, is the way we express our values as well as our hopes and visions. The way we live, the relationships we nurture, the ways we seek to repair harm, and our willingness to behold the inherent worth and dignity in others, even when we are in conflict. This is our prayer for peace. Yet, in the course of living out our values, we bump into each other. We don't always agree, and it doesn't always feel peaceful. Still, today and every day, let us continue imperfectly but faithfully to create peace. Come, let us worship together.
Every year, we, the people, are called to unite in remembrance and unite in a time of prayer for peace. Let us remember now those who have served and those who have died. Let us accept our responsibility to care for those who came home carrying wounds from war. In a nation as divided as ours, people pray for peace. I'm sorry, I didn't mean divided, I meant diverse. In a nation as diverse as we are, People pray in all kinds of different ways. Each religious tradition carries its own vision for peace. One lone Zen monk sits still atop a mountain as a prayer for the end of violence, while another practices engaged Buddhism and is exiled for protesting the war in his homeland of Vietnam. The peace churches, like the Quakers and the Mennonites and the Brethren, are steadfast pacifists and resist war absolutely. The Unitarian Universalists, we affirm a range of individual choices, including military service and conscientious objection. For Unitarian Universalists, the exercise of individual conscience is holy work. Conscientious discernment leads us to engage in the creation of peace in many, many different ways. I'm reading now from the 2010 Statement of Conscience called Creating Peace from the UUA. For those among us who make a formal commitment to military service, we honor their commitment, welcome them home, and offer pastoral support. For those among us who make a formal commitment as a conscientious objector, we honor their commitment, offer documents, and pastoral support. This morning, I've invited 4 veterans to share from the heart about their thoughts on this Memorial Day. They will be frank, they will be honest, and some of what you hear may disturb you. I just ask that you please take care of yourselves, move around the space, move in and out of the room as you need to. We'll hear first from Stephen Young.
Hi, I'm Steve. He, him, older, I was going to say senior, white man with white hair, facial hair, and wearing a blue shirt. My young parents married in 1938 as my father was working to become a CPA, that is a certified public accountant. And they and their friends were interested in conscience-based anti-war efforts and found the Society of Friends, or Quakers, felt right for them. Then, when confronted with the military draft during World War II, my father sought recognition as a conscientious objector. So, growing up in Southern California, I attended Quaker schools through the 8th grade, then public schools. We attended meetings for worship regularly, and I was involved in many youth activities of the American Friends Service Committee in Southern California and in anti-war protests. This was my background and thinking as I turned 18 in 1960 and registered for the military draft. 2 Quaker teachings that have always been important to me are the worth and dignity of every person, and that there is that of God in every person. I can think of no time when violence or armed confrontation is the preferred means of solving a conflict. And this certainly was my thinking at that time. A Quaker thought question: where there is hatred, division, or strife, how are we instruments of reconciliation? These beliefs meant that in 1960, I faced a choice as I graduated from high school. State land-grant colleges, like UCLA, were required to have military reserve officers training corps, or ROTC, programs. And ROTC was a required class for all first-year and sophomore men. I felt I could not attend any of the established state-supported universities, so I went to Reed College in Portland. While I was at Reed, My Pasadena, California draft board referred me to the local Portland draft board for interviews, and I convinced them that I was a conscientious objector and to grant me the 1-0 status. I was in line to serve alternative service if other life events had not intervened. Today, we are remembering and honoring those who have served this country, and I appreciate Mike and Emmett and Sam and others for what they have done as individuals. But I have mixed feelings about what should be honored. For many young men during the period of the active draft, serving in the armed forces was a rite of passage. For many people who serve now, it still is. I understand why we honor those who have put their lives on the line for others, but I don't think that this can be the only type of service that we honor. So today, I hope we can honor those who did not serve in the armed forces and the Coast Guard because of various barriers, whether those barriers were based on gender, sexual orientation and identity, disability, or moral and religious objections. These are people who have added to society in their own unique ways. Thank you.
Hello, I'm Mike Peterson. I identify as he, him, and I'm a white guy, as you can tell. And I have a wife, Janet, daughter, Sarah, and 4 grandkids, the oldest of which had a baby last week. So that makes us great-grandparents. I enlisted in the Marine Corps in 1967 and was discharged in 1970. I extended my tour of duty to serve with the Combined Action Program, otherwise known as CAPS, the other war to win the hearts and minds of the Vietnamese people. The Combined Action Platoons centered around a squad of Marines plus a Navy corpsman, and the Vietnamese counterparts was a platoon of popular forces served under the district chief's control. I like to think that we spared the Vietnamese of our hamlet of the destructiveness of the main force Marine and Army grunt outfits. Grunt, by the way, is the term for infantry. As an example, there was a time an outfit of the 101st Airborne Division entered our hamlet, and soon he was confronted by a Vietnamese hooch, which had an attached bunker. The leader of the squad commanded to blow it, the hooch as well as the bunker. I said something like, well, if your country was at war for 50+ years, you'd have a bunker too. And there was an evening near our site for the night when a group of elders, obviously leaders of that hamlet, I approached one of the leaders, hands clasped together, with a "Chào ông man nhoi con." Good evening, sir. How are you? The elder's face lightened as if to say, finally, an American with manners. My conscience commands me to relate everything, the good and the bad, that surrounded the CAP program, as well as other Americans involved with torture. Our CAP tortured 2 Viet Cong suspects on 2 different occasions. The process involved holding the suspect down, a washcloth placed over their nose and mouth, with soap lathered up to where the suspect was convinced he or she was drowning. Hence the term waterboarding. The company gunnery sergeant over us told us that this was strictly a Vietnamese affair, but I tolerated it nonetheless. Given that experience, one wonders whether he or she will increasingly say, enough, I've had it with this stuff. I should never have been allowed to command a CAP platoon. My military occupational specialty was field radio operator. I could keep my cool and call in some crap. One night, toward the end of my tour of duty, we were ambushed by a unit of the Army of the Republic of Vietnam. The Marine in front of me, Tom Williams, was killed, and the Marine behind me was wounded, leaving me alive to blame myself. Herman Wouk, in his novel War and Remembrance, said it best: either war is finished or we are. Thank you for this opportunity to speak.
Good morning. My name's Emmett Band. I am a shortish, older male who uses the pronouns he and him. I also like to listen to the saxophone. I especially like Joshua Redmond, Art Pepper, and Augie Sabini. Everyone knows someone who has gone off to war, a father, a brother, a son, or a sister. My grandfather served in France during the First World War as a company commander. His family had his letters home printed in a book, which I have a copy of. My Uncle Tom flew B-17s in the Second World War. My Uncle Emmett was in the Marine Corps in Europe. None of these men spoke of their experiences. We tend to think of the people who go off to war as very brave souls, and perhaps they are, or perhaps the brave ones said no. In Tim Robbins' book, The Things They Carried, the author has to decide whether to flee to Canada or submit to the selective service system and presumably fight in Vietnam. What is the moral choice here? How do I follow the law, or do I follow my conscience? Do I even know at 20 years of age what the right decision is? Most Vietnam draftees were in their late teens and made up about 25% of the service members in Vietnam. I was 20 and a day when my father drove me to the local Greyhound bus station. It was 4 o'clock in the morning on a Wednesday. I went into the green-painted, fluorescent lamp-lit station and mingled with 20 or 30 other young men who were not talking to one another. Yeah, they were scared. They didn't know what the future held. Scared though I was, I chose to go along with this program. Perhaps I chose the easy way out. I complied with the law and headed off to the Armed Forces Entrance and Examining Station in Oakland, California. After the day had passed, a sergeant asked, who wanted to volunteer for the Marine Corps? And nobody stepped forward. So he said, you 5. So the next morning, we got on another bus and headed to San Diego for the Marine Corps Recruit Depot. The first moment there, as we arrived in the Greyhound bus, a sergeant got on the bus and started yelling at us to get out, get off the bus, get in the line, form a formation, and he was really rude. So this went on. We followed the yellow bricks. We got our hair removed. We got our clothes. We were billeted in a hut for the evening. The next morning, the sergeant got up. Oh, by the way, his name was Sergeant Payne. Told us to get out and form a formation in front of our hooch. And then we were assigned to clean the parade ground of all the cigarette butts. And this yelling and whatnot, and physical, the running and the walking and the marching and all went on for some number of weeks, and eventually we were assigned weapons, so we were supposed to march back and forth. When one member of our squad, our platoon, sorry, was handed that rifle, he put it on the ground and stood back up. Of course, Sergeant Payne yelled at him. That's what he did for a living, right? This went on for a couple of days. It was really clear that Sergeant Payne and the other officers or sergeants weren't going to have any success in convincing this guy that he ought to behave. So one evening he disappeared, and we never knew what the heck happened to him. But it was somebody whose draft board did not recognize that he took his religious belief systems seriously, and that he was, in fact, a conscientious objector. In June of '66, I graduated, and I got my first airplane ride. I went home to visit my parents for a few weeks. Then I went back to Los Angeles and eventually to El Toro, got on a plane, that's my third airplane ride, to the Hawaiian Islands, to Guam, and finally to Da Nang. They were shipping so many troops over there at the time, they didn't have the military transport necessary to accommodate all these kids. So we flew on a commercial flight. I think it was Pan Am. There were stewardesses. And we're flying into a war zone. And this seemed kind of incongruous to me. I didn't understand it. We're flying into a war zone, and we have these stewardesses on this plane. Da Nang was pretty secure. Despite boot camp, oh, I missed something, I'm sorry. So from Da Nang, I went to Chu Lai, where I was assigned to the 1st Recon Battalion. And what I wanted to say was, despite all this training, there's really not much that can prepare you for war. The decision to comply with the selective service system changed my life forever. At one point, I was injured in a firefight, and the blood was flowing so profusely over my face that I couldn't see. The corpsman wrapped my head in the bandage, and once the firefight was over, I was sent to a hospital in Chu Lai. I'm fine. The thing about war is that moments of calm are broken by an intensity that is very difficult to describe. One moment, all is quiet, and then shooting rings out, and the person next to you falls to the ground. You respond by grabbing your weapon. You fire back. You defend your position. And afterwards, when you put this person in a body bag, you ask yourself, what if that was me? What could I have done to protect that man? And that question stays with you forever. Some veterans don't talk about their military experiences. They buried them deeply underground. My brother-in-law, Tommy, who was a helicopter crew chief in Vietnam, at the same time I was there, we didn't know each other then, would never, ever even admit that he was at Chu Lai. It was such a traumatic experience for him. And one of the legacies of my time in Vietnam is that I tracked every helicopter that flies overhead. They were our saviors when they did our insertions, they did our extractions. They dropped us into the bush, they took us out of the bush. And when we were in the helicopters, we were a large target, a large noisy target, but we were relatively safe because we knew we were going back to Chu Lai. So we watched and we waited for our helicopter to arrive. In 2006, I returned to Vietnam and rode a bicycle from Hue to Saigon after I visited Hanoi. The people I met didn't hate me. They actually smiled. They greeted me. Phyllis and I made a trek back this last March. The country has really changed dramatically over the past 20 years, almost always for the better. What's also changed is my relationship to Phyllis. Somehow, sharing the experience of visiting Vietnam with her has brought us closer in ways that I don't understand. While we were traveling in Vietnam, I'd hold her, tears would fill my eyes, and I would thank her. Thank you for sharing this. For me, this completed a circle. From the horrors of war to a deeper relationship with my wife, and a more complete understanding of my relationship to Vietnam and the people who live there. And on this Memorial Day, I will remember Bruce Laporte, Pappy Ayers, and Patrick Francis Cunha. Thank you very much.
Good morning. My name is Sam Hunt. I'm in preliminary fellowship with the UUA and a fellow Eugene Oregonian. I'm a white male with brown hair, green eyes, and wearing a gray collared shirt. Memorial Day has always carried weight for me, but over the years, the weight has changed shape. For some, Memorial Day is a long weekend. For others, it's flags, cookouts, family gatherings, or the unofficial beginning of summer. But for many veterans, service members, military families, and those who have lost people they love, this day is layered. It carries pride and grief, honor and anger, gratitude and heartbreak, sometimes all at once. And for me, it carries conflict. I served in the military for 17 years. I believed deeply in service. I believed in protecting people. I believed in commitment, sacrifice, and being part of something larger than myself. I served alongside people of incredible courage, compassion, and integrity. People who would give the shirt off their back to protect someone next to me and next to them. People who carried unimaginable burdens quietly. This Memorial Day, I could tell you my war stories. I can mention the things I've done. I could talk about the lives lost. But this year, Memorial Day, I asked something difficult of me. Because despite that service, despite those years, despite my commitment to my fellow soldiers, I was ultimately forced out of the military because I am transgender. So this Memorial Day asks me to hold love and pain in the same hand. It asks me to honor people I serve beside while also acknowledging the wounds left behind by the institution itself. It asks me to wrestle with that little patriotism that I have left. It asks me to remember the best of humanity and the worst of it together. And maybe that is why Memorial Day matters, because real remembrance is never simple. Former President and General Dwight D. Eisenhower once said, "I hate war as only a soldier who has lived it can, only as one who has seen its brutality, its futility, its stupidity." This quote reverberates in my body, and when Reverend Jen mentioned it, I felt that empty space in my soul. Not because it dismisses service. It doesn't. It comes from someone who understood service deeply. It comes from someone who witnessed war closely enough to stop glorifying it. And I think sometimes our culture struggles with that distinction. Supporting troops is not the same thing as glorifying war. Loving service members does not require loving violence. Honoring sacrifice does not require silence about justice, injustice. In fact, I would argue that the people most qualified to speak honestly about the horrors of war are often the people who served, who witnessed. Because many who serve do not come home celebrating destruction. They come home carrying memories, grief, trauma, questions, regret, pride, confusion, and loss. Sometimes all at once. And that complexity deserves space in our sanctuaries. As UUs, we often speak about the inherent worth and dignity of every person. Every person. Not just the people that we agree with politically, not just civilians, not just marginalized communities, not just Americans. Every person. That means we must care about innocent civilians harmed by war. It means we must care about refugees. It means we must care about oppressed communities. It means we must care about queer and transgender people. It also means we must care about the 18-year-old service member sent into the impossible situations carrying fear, loyalty, and hope. Compassion cannot be selective if it's truly compassion. I think one of the deepest struggles I carry is this. I hate war. I hate watching communities dehumanize one another. I hate watching people become disposable in the name of power, politics, nationalism, or fear. And yet I still feel connected to those who served. Because most people who join the military are not monsters. Many join because they want purpose, education, stability, community, a chance to protect others, a way to survive, a way to belong. Some join because they genuinely want to help. And many discover the moral complexity of war only after They are already inside it. So when I say I support troops, I'm not saying I support war, every political decision, or every act committed in the name of the nation. I'm saying I refuse to abandon human beings. I refuse to reduce people to stereotypes. I refuse to believe that compassion must be divided into teams. That refusal matters deeply to me as a transgender veteran, because I know what it feels like to give your life to an institution and then be told you no longer belong. I know what it feels like to love something while also feeling wounded by it. I know what it feels like to stand in contradiction, and maybe many of us do. Because the truth is, most of life is contradiction. We can love our families and still be hurt by them. We can love our country and still demand it do better. We can honor service while condemning violence. We can grieve lives lost on all sides of conflict. We can support troops while rejecting hatred, authoritarianism, racism, transphobia, homophobia, and every ideology that tells us some people matter less than others. These truths can coexist. And I think Memorial Day calls us into the uncomfortable coexistence, not into easy slogans, not into performative patriotism, not into cynicism either, but into moral courage. The courage to remember honestly. The courage to hold grief without turning away. The courage to humanize even when the world demands division. The courage to build peace into a culture often addicted to conflict. Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. once said, in such an easy, simple quote, "Returning violence for violence multiplies violence." History has shown us that hatred rarely stays contained. It spreads, it consumes, it teaches generations to fear one another. And so today I think Memorial Day should not only be about remembering the dead, it should also be about asking the living, what kind of world are we living? What kind of world are we building? Are we building a world where young people inherit endless cycles of violence? Or are we building one with dignity, which matters more than domination? Are we teaching our children empathy? Are we teaching them critical thinking? Are we teaching them how to resolve conflict without dehumanizing one another? Are we teaching them that strength and compassion are not opposites? Because I've seen extraordinary compassion among service members. I've seen people risk their lives for strangers. I've seen people care for one another through unimaginable hardship. And I've also seen systems fail people. Both are true. Every human matters. Today, I remember those who died. I remember those carrying invisible wounds. I remember veterans struggling silently. I remember civilians caught in the crossfire of conflict around the world. I remember communities targeted by hate. And I remember the complicated reality that many who serve are themselves searching for meaning, healing, and peace. Memorial Day does not ask me to abandon my conviction against war. It does not ask me to stop loving the people I serve beside. It asks me to hold both. To honor humanity over ideology, to choose compassion over hatred, to choose truth over propaganda, to choose peace whenever possible. And perhaps that is one of the holiest acts we can offer the world right now. Not blind allegiance, not blind condemnation, but honest, courageous compassion. May we remember the fallen by building a world with less violence. May we honor those who served by caring for them when they come home. May we reject the hatred toward any people or community. And may we continue the sacred, difficult work of seeing one another as fully human. Namaste. Amen.
And let's say our closing words together as Heidi extinguishes. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again. And now, friends, as you go out into the world, crave peace for all of the people, beginning with yourselves. And go as you go with the dream of that peace alive in your hearts. Go in love, my friends.